Prime Minister's unveiled his new look front bench, elevating a record number of women to cabinet. Nationals MP Bridget McKenzie becomes the nation's first female agriculture minister. Marise Payne becomes the first female minister for women. Susan Lee has also been returned to the front bench, taking on the environment portfolio. She replaces Melissa Price, who's been demoted to industrial relations. Meanwhile, Ken Wyatt's become the first Indigenous MP to be promoted to cabinet. He's taking on the role of Indigenous Affairs Minister. Paul Fletcher will take over from Mitch Fifield in communications. Scott Morrison's also made clear his plans to fill some of Australia's most important overseas posts.
I intend to recommend to the Governor-General that Arthur Sinodinos be appointed Australia's next ambassador to the United States of America, and I intend to recommend to the Governor-General that Mitch Fifield be appointed our next ambassador to the United Nations. They will both be exceptional representatives of Australia, and our country's interests abroad will be well served in those roles.
Very important announcements, and leaves a few vacancies open in the Senate. With the odds against him at the election, Scott Morrison has the power to shape his team as he sees fit. He's taken on the role of emphasising the role of women and looking to promote the next generation of leaders. Sky News political editor David Spears explains what the New Look ministry means for the 46th Parliament.
Scott Morrison had far more authority in choosing this cabinet than last time around when he took over the job after a messy leadership battle. Now he has the authority vested in him after an against-the-odds election win. He's largely going for stability. The Treasurer, Finance Minister, Foreign Affairs, Home Affairs Ministers all stay in their roles. But there are nonetheless some very interesting changes, and the most surprising are in fact the departures. Mitch Fifield leaves Cabinet and Parliament altogether eventually. He will become Australia's ambassador to the United Nations in New York. This, I'm told, was his decision. He was offered a role to stay in Cabinet but has opted to go. Similarly, Arthur Sinodinos was offered a role in the ministry, but he chose to take up a role he'd in fact been offered years ago, and that is the top diplomatic role, Australia's ambassador to the United States, based in Washington. Now, within the Senate, there will have to be replacements for both of them. The party can choose who to replace them with. Jim Molan, the red-hot tip, to take over Arthur Sinodinos' role as a senator for New South Wales, and in Victoria to replace Mitch Fifield, Sarah Henderson, who missed out in Corangamite, is one of the front-runners to take that Senate position. Amongst the other ministerial changes, there are still some quite interesting moves, and an historic one too. Ken Wyatt becoming the first Indigenous Australian to be a Cabinet Minister and the Minister for Indigenous Australians. We also see some of those close to the Prime Minister are promoted here. Stuart Robert from Queensland taking on a tough task as a minister specifically for the National Disability Insurance Scheme. It's a scheme that is mammoth in its scope and needs fixing. There are big service delivery problems right here, and Stuart Roberts' job is to get his head under the bonnet and try and fix some of those structural problems. We also see the states that performed well for the government at the election rewarded. Queensland, more ministers from Queensland, one more from Tasmania as well. In Victoria, that's where the government went backwards. Some new faces from Victoria, but they are specifically those who held their marginal seats against the swing, the likes of Michael Sukkar and Jason Wood coming back into the outer ministry. The Prime Minister keeps a record 7 women in his ministry, 2 gone, one being Kelly O'Dwyer, who left before the election, and Melissa Price, who saw the writing on the wall after her poor performance in the environment portfolio. She steps down to an outer ministerial role outside of the Cabinet. Coming into the Cabinet, in terms of the female representation, Susan Lee making a return, and we also see Anne Ruston step into the ministry as well. These changes do make sense. These are not changes at the senior level, but do give a fresh face to the Morrison government, the re-elected Morrison government, and he now wants these ministers to get on with the job of delivering the government's agenda.